soul in the early morning. Wake up again, it's a new day. Wake up my soul, it's time to fly. Float on the winds and kiss the sky. The birds and flowers were made for you and me. I must be all I can be.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Labor with Leo. Once again, you are joining us in dealing with an amazing topic, an amazing issue. All right. And so, guys, we just want to appreciate you a lot. We just want to say how much we appreciate you. You have been doing great. You have been supporting day after day after day. And on this week, as we look on the idea of protecting our women, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have to take a stance. We have to stand up. We have to speak out. We have to do what we must, because this thing is on the rise and it is eating away at our nation. All right. So guys, this morning, we just want to give a little hail out, of course, to our people. But this morning, we're going to get straight into our talk. We are going to get straight into our talk. There's a lot to be said. There's a lot to discuss. I know you have your questions. I know you have your remarks that you would like to make. All right. I know a lot of you called in yesterday and shared some of your experiences. You can call in once again. But before we do so, let's just give a little hail out to our people here. Show our appreciation to some of the fans out here. All right, up on the chat, we got Margaret Roach. I'm seeing Patsy Kissoon, Gail Archibald, Ellsworth Richards, Denison McIntyre, Elizabeth Robert Stewart. I'm seeing Florence Sturton up in here, Wendy and Norton, Marcia Maya, Andrea Frederick, Bernice Payne, Astra De Silva, June Lois. We got Emlyn Guy, Jerry Collado from the Philippines. Good evening to you, Jerry. Joy Gishad, Elizabeth Jurity. We got Hendrickson Andrews in the chat. We got Glenda Allen, Misty Blue. Boy, Indarde. I hope I got that right. Indarde. All right. Shirley Alcantara, Sandra Lamb, Veronica Joseph. All right, guys, that's just a few names that I'm seeing on the chat. Just want to say big up to every single one of you, and we appreciate you so much for joining us here. All right. We got a special invited guest on the show this morning, all right? And he's going to give us some great insight and, of course, from a different angle in looking at this whole issue of protecting our women from violence and preserving our men as well. So we got to work on the men as well, because that is where a lot of the issues come from. So we got to work on the men, all right? I'm already seeing a call coming in here, but I don't know if this is a mistake, but I'm already seeing a call and we barely even started. All right, but this morning, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to welcome a very interesting individual. He has been through a lot, and what I like about him is he is bilingual, so you might just get a little Jamaican from him this morning. All right, and he's going to be helping us. He is a really powerful guy. I mean, he is the president-elect of the Trinidad and Tobago Psychology, the Association of Psychology, and he is involved in this thing day and night, day in, day out. And without further ado, I just want to introduce to you, he was here just a couple weeks ago, and he is back to deal with this important topic. Welcome with me, ladies and gentlemen, the man himself, Mr. Charles J.P. Collier. Good morning to you, sir. How you doing?
You're on mute.
Good morning to you, sir. How you doing?
Good morning. Okay, I could not hear a word you were saying.
All right.
I apologize.
All right. I'm sorry about that. Were we going through the air?
Yes.
All right. Okay. Good.
That's the bad talking. So
right. I hope you hear us in the same. Yeah. So you couldn't hear the introduction. We had to say a couple things about you. We didn't want you to rebut. So yeah. Great to have you back on the show this morning, Mr. Collier, and a man of great experience, been been in this business for a long, long time now, over 20 years. And, you have a lot to share. So we're glad to be chatting with you this morning about protecting our women and preserving our men. All right. When you heard about this topic, we know that this thing has been in the atmosphere for quite some time. When you heard about this topic and we're dealing with this topic right here on the show, what came to your mind?
Part of it is the complexity of it and the immensity of it. This is a big issue. It's a huge, broad, complicated issue, and at the moment it's sort of in view for a lot of people, because there have been some especially sort of horrifying murders and sexual assaults of women, and so it's made it sort of very public, but it's been there uh, under under the radar for much of our society, and especially for men.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's been as much under the radar for women,
Hmm.
because women have a very different experience, and when they talk about what they experience with respect to gender-based violence of different kinds, it can be shocking
Right.
as you realize that you're not really functioning in the same reality
Right.
that women are.
Mm.
So we had you're right that there's a lot. It's a complicated and significant problem.
And this morning, we would like to get, as much as we can, we would like to get some solutions as to how we can, make a step in going about effecting change concerning this whole situation. But before we can find solution, before we can help, we must know, we must have an idea about the situation. I mean, we can't just run out there blindfoldedly and trying to help in a situation we have no idea about. So, could you give us a little idea about violence, especially because that is where it is predominant, especially against women? When we speak about non-partner violence, interpersonal violence, intimate partner violence, could you give us a little insight about violence in particular against women?
Yes. So one of the challenges that we're having is that gender-based violence, the name is sort of neutral.
Right.
And taken on the surface, it would suggest that it's violence that is based on gender, and the implication is that it can go either way. And technically, it can. And in some instances, men are subjected to violence because they are men. There's definitely a problem with mismatching appropriate responses and treatment and engagement of boys in the school systems, for
Right.
example.
Right.
Right? That's a real issue. But as a general rule, when we're talking about gender-based violence, overwhelmingly what we're talking about is violence that is perpetrated against girls and women.
Right.
Um, which is not to say that girls and women are not, innocent of any wrongdoing, that they don't engage in any kind of violent behavior or anything like that. That's not the case.
Right.
But there's a disproportionate, uneven pattern in which girls and women are the subjects and the targets of violence at an alarming rate. Sort of global estimates at this point suggest that women and girls, on average, 1 in 3 women and girls experience physical or sexual violence.
We're talking millions here,
Literally billions.
Wow.
1 in 3 women or girls are subjected to some kind of sexual or physical violence. But that is sort of the tip of the iceberg in its own respect.
Right.
Because usually what we're talking about when we talk about violence in that way, um, are the more overt, sort of explicit, readily defined and identified physical actions.
Right.
Um, but those physical actions tend to be much less frequent than other kinds of abuse and violence.
Okay.
And, and so, emotional, psychological, economic, um, those kinds of abuse occur and they are less visible, um, and they are much more common than
Mm.
the physical, direct physical violence. And so, if 1 in 3 girls and women are exposed to direct physical violence, by the time you begin to talk about psychological abuse, verbal abuse, um, emotional maltreatment, uh, economic um, abuse or maltreatment in some particular way, what you end up looking at is that almost every woman or girl that you know experiences this.
Wow.
Almost every woman.
Wow.
And what's happened recently, um, is that over in the last less than 6 months, we've had two particularly um, public instances in which young women were sexually assaulted and murdered, um, while engaged in just going about life, just doing the things that they have to do to live, just normal living. And it's been terrifying for women because it has sort of highlighted their vulnerability, and it's a vulnerability of which they were already more aware than men are.
Right. Right.
Right. So if you talk to women in your life, you ask women in your life if they've ever had the experience of having a man retaliate against them for not paying attention to him. Not only will they all tell you yes, but they'll also tell you that in many instances they are calculating how to respond to men
Right.
just in everyday life,
Right.
because that is such a pervasive risk for them,
Mm-hmm.
that they're trying to figure out, okay, if I say this, how will this man respond? If I don't
Right.
say anything, what will he do? If I just go my way quietly, is he going to, and it's a constant calculation that is going on for a lot of women, just going to work, going to the supermarket, going to church, sitting in church.
Wow.
It's a constant thought that has to be entertained and considered. And so, um, that the thing that I'm raising is just how pervasive this is, how prevalent this is, how common this is.
Now,
And mhm.
it is really interesting in some ways when you look at women experiencing those things, because you spoke about the emotional part of things, the economic part of things, because it is not visible. um, do you believe, based on your experience, I know you would have dealt with a lot of clients that are women experiencing different things, do you believe that women experience abuse and violence in those ways and not even know, they are not even aware that they are experiencing abuse?
In some instances, so one of the things that happens is that if you are exposed to a particular kind of maltreatment over and over and over and over and over, you may feel bad, but you may also not know that there's an option for something different.
Okay.
And that can certainly happen. But in most instances, women are aware that something is wrong. Um, Part of the challenge is that when women address these issues, there's a lot of pushback. There's a lot of objection. There are, in different ways we silence women,
Right.
or dismiss them. We have a lot of um, stereotypes and beliefs about women that provide justification for not listening to them.
Right.
So, for example, say things like women are so emotional, they exaggerate in it, they, you know, it's not that serious, Um, and every part of that is just bizarre. The idea that women are so emotional, like, well, um, over and over, every year, there are domestic homicides,
Right.
um, that someone who is either uh, the current romantic partner or a former romantic partner goes to the extent of killing someone, their partner or former partner. And certainly in Trinidad and Tobago, year after year, when you look at those cases, the victims are almost always women.
Hmm.
The perpetrators are almost always men. Men get to the place where they decide to kill their partner or their former partner, but women are the ones who have problems with their emotional regulation.
Wow. Good question. Good question. I think, I mean, there's a problem, and while the women are faced with these issues, it seemed to me as though we're making the women look as though they have the problem. So they are faced with the abuse, of the violence in whatever way, and we are asking women to walk with pepper spray to protect yourself. Don't stay out late. Be careful who you're liming around. Be careful where you're walking. Be careful. Do this, do that. They are the ones experiencing. They are the one. They are the victims. In majority, they are the victims in this case, but we are looking at them and telling them, this is what you need to do, this is what you need to avoid doing. And what are we doing? Because it seems as though the problem is with the men. The men have the problem because they are the ones that can't seem to be disciplined in if there's a breakup, okay, just let the woman leave. The men seem to have the problem, and it seems as though it is not directed enough to dealing with the men, but we are focusing on the women and speaking to the women, and acting as if the women shouldn't and should and shouldn't and should. But I just want to introduce to our panel a wonderful guy, a guy that has been fighting for women and men and the rights, and getting things in order, ensuring that the world is a better place. That man is none other than our very own Michael A.T. Stewart. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to welcome to you on the panel Michael A.T. Stewart. How you doing this morning, my man?
Thank you very much, Leo, and sorry for my late arrival on your set.
That's all right. That's all right. All right. Glad to have you on.
Let me say good morning to the other panelists also, the Collier.
Good morning, Brother Stewart. How are you?
Very good, very good. Good to see you.
You too.
All right, well, jumping right into it, Brother Mike, as we started chatting on women and, the situation that we find ourselves in. Men are being abused, and we made that clear, but in the general sense of things, women are predominantly taken advantage of. Just last night, as I was looking at what was happening around the country, a young, healthy, strong-looking guy was just walking the street, and a woman looking like she was in her 60s It's just taking care of her business, looking like she was handling some stories with a grocery bag or whatnot. And that young man decided he is going to take his young, strong self and go take advantage of that older woman, burst the chain from her neck, and act as if she can't do anything about it. So something is wrong. There is a problem, and we have to show where the problem is coming from. We have to find out what is the problem, and we have to take a stand. We have to make a step forward in getting this thing sorted out.
Well, I heard Brother Collier say when I entered that the records show that the majority of perpetrators are men, and I support that wholeheartedly. Therefore, the solution must be found within the brotherhood of men.
Right.
Right. There, and I think that sometimes we still missing the mark as to how we go about doing that. I know
Right.
that there was some time ago, one government that was in in office at the time set up a 12-man committee to look into the whole aspect of doing the solution to this abuse and so on. And they set up a 12-man committee. 8 of those men were women to deal with an issue on men. And I wonder if therefore we are saying that the solution has to be found with men, but you put up a 12 committee and put 8 of them as women. You understand? So while I support the point and I support it wholeheartedly, I think we as men need to come together and do some serious talk, because men will hear what men see,
Right.
the issues and so on. So the conscious men need to be more active, more proactive in being able to come together to be able for us to be able to now sit down and say, man, this is it.
Yes.
The songs that that we sing, and the artists, especially the male artists, need to sing more uplifting songs,
Right.
and songs that would demonstrate the kind of input that a man should be given of a level of character and integrity, etc., that we need to encourage our artists to pen. But it seems as though the writers of the songs seem to think that if we could continue to sing the degrading songs, we can get away with it. The things that we can sing, we cannot say.
Right.
Because the very thing that we'll dance to, if we say those same things, we'll be vilified for them. Yeah. So I agree with that. And so when we had the women's movement, there was a major summit that was held in Beijing. I think it was when the feminism started and its move, etc., and really took off in a very significant way. Probably we need a summit of men, because that was a summit of women. You see, so we need something to bring together men from all quarters. One of the things, however, about men is that when you call meetings, men don't like meetings.
As you mentioned that, when you look at especially non-abusive men, when things like this come up, I get the feeling as though men that are not involved in abusing women, they tend to back off and say, well, that is not me, that is not my business, I don't do those things, so they don't pay attention, or it seemed like that. They don't pay attention, they don't try to get involved. How important it is for non-abusive men to get involved in putting a stop to this?
Well, and that's why they put in role models and ambassadors to be able to go out and represent the country. So you'll take an athlete who has done well to be a sporting ambassador, etc., because you use those who may have conquered in a certain sphere or really have set an example to be able to be the spokesperson, the face, the image of an organization, of a country, of a club. And the same thing has to be done also when we talk about men. We need to be able to lift up the role models. You would see posters of successful women in various fields of endeavor, women in leadership, and so on. And you'll see all of these things. In fact, I just saw recently a poster with about 7 or 8 women who have made a school proud in their various fields of endeavor.
Right.
Where are those posters for men?
Hmm.
Where are those pictures showing up? Because not all men are perpetrators. Not all men are negative. Not all men are bad. But where are the pictures and the posters that showing up the men who have done? Whenever we do a workshop, we see workshops of women who have broken the glass ceiling. We see women of empowerment, etc. Yes, and we support that 100%. We are saying match that also. And when you have a workshop, why do we name the workshop masculine toxicity or toxic masculinity? Many times, and that is becoming a popular workshop phrase when we're dealing with workshop to help men. Saying it from the negative. When you go in there and you speak in a workshop with women, you're always in a positive mode because you are showing how women are progressed and so on, and which is lovely and laudable. When we go into workshop and we talk about masculine, how toxic masculinity, you always have to speak with it from the negative standpoint. And I remember going into one workshop where the topic was toxic masculinity, and I only found out the topic after I accepted. I accepted to speak while I was driving in Trinidad at one time. So I didn't really go through all of it. And they said, "Oh, this is for boys and for men." So I accepted because I was happy that it was for boys and men. So by the time they sent me the written invitation, the topic was toxic masculinity, and I wrote back to people and I said, when you go in there, the only thing you could speak about is how toxic men are. Could we not change it and so on? But it was a bit late. All the advertisement went out, etc. And when we went there, um, the boys, it was teenage boys and so on. One boy said, "So why are you all coming to us with toxic masculinity? Would we ever have a program for women saying toxic femininity?" And one of the organizers hit me and said, but that's the same thing you were raising.
Hmm.
Yes, sir. So my father said this statement some years ago. Either we swing together or we hang separately. Have you ever heard that phrase?
Well, I heard it from you once before.
Right. Well, that means we've got to do this thing together, male and female, because while we have perpetrators of men, we do have some women that push some men to the edge.
Right.
Let's not pretend that does not take so. And while there are women who have been going through certain challenges in life, we need to be able to help the men to understand we are the ones to help relieve the stress of society, because the records show that we are the greater perpetrators. You see? So we've got to be part of the solution. But also we've got to also understand that we cannot go ahead and help the women and leave the men outside. We have to swing together.
Lovely.
Or we will certainly hang.
Lovely. Lovely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, be sure to call in. All right, you can post your questions to our guest and they would answer it as accordingly. All right. We have a question here from Diana John. Her question is, what are your thoughts on when a man reaches the point of killing his spouse or girlfriend? It is that he has temporarily gone insane. What is your thoughts on that? I'll ask this one to Mr. Collier. What's your thoughts on that? When a man reaches the point of killing his spouse or girlfriend, it is that he is temporarily gone insane.
No, not usually. It is possible for that to be the case, but it's not typically.
Right.
Usually, when there's a domestic homicide, there's a pattern that precedes it. Usually, there is a pattern of domestic violence that
Right.
precedes it. And usually, there is an escalation of that violence. Most domestic homicides are committed when the perpetrator, usually a man, either is afraid that his partner is going to leave him, or sometime after she has left him, or when there is some further signal of the end of the relationship, such as divorce proceedings or something along those lines. And so it's not, um, if it's temporary insanity, then it's temporarily been taking place for quite some time.
Right.
Right? Um, uh, so that notion generally doesn't fit what has transpired. There's usually a pattern of violence that has escalated, perhaps from um, early controlling behavior in the relationship, where he is trying to regulate who she's talking to, where she is, trying to make sure she's not around anybody else. She don't talk to anybody else. She, stay away from her friends. Don't be by her family. That's where it starts, and it escalates over time, or he escalates over time into more and more overt and explicit behavior in an effort to control her. And usually, when it's evident that she is leaving him, or she is forming a new relationship with somebody else, or something along those lines, he feels as though he has lost control. And so he takes the ultimate step to exercise control over her, controls whether she lives or dies.
And that would lead me to another question. It's a big question that we've been asking. People have been asking for a long, long time. Why do women stay? Why do they stay? Could that be one of the reasons um, why they stay? Because we're seeing that over and over, women and
Boy.
especially those that would have come out and speak about it, talk about they have been in an abusive relationship for how many years, why? Because women, we know that they are intelligent, they can make great decisions, they have sense, everybody have sense, but why would they stay? Is it something that they are holding on to, something that they are not seeing? Why would women stay? Is it something that they are afraid of? Let me hear what you have to say on that. Why would they stay?
Okay. So I've heard that question more times than I can
Yeah.
than I can count. And I usually push back against the question,
Right.
because the question frames men's behavior
Right.
as women's responsibility.
Right.
And one of my questions is, how come we don't ask, why do the men continue to engage in the behavior?
Right.
Which is what we do with other criminal behavior, right? If you assault someone, that's a crime. If I go down the street now, right after we have had this lovely discussion, if I go down the road and somebody assaults me in the street and I call the police, they're not going to say to me, "So why were you walking down the street?
Right.
What were you doing
Right.
walking down the street?" That's not the question. The question is, what do you look like? What was he wearing? Did he have a gun? They want to know about the perpetrator, not about the victim, because the responsibility for the behavior rests with the perpetrator, not with the victim.
And that's what we've been seeing happening for a long time, a woman been abused, and you're going to ask, well, what were you doing at his house, why were you wearing this, why were you out this late, and we start questioning the women.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the implication is that it's their fault.
Right.
Right. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that, with regard to the question itself, why do women stay? Well, usually not the reasons that people sort of want to ascribe to women.
All right.
I've heard even people within my own profession try to, assign to women their internal issues as the reason that they stay. She has low self-esteem, she's codependent. No, that's not usually how that works. In fact, the low self-esteem may have more to do with what she's been experiencing in the relationship than
Right.
anything
Okay.
else.
Okay.
Right? That may be the outcome, not the cause.
Right.
But there are a lot of things that happen, and we're talking at the moment about intimate partner violence. We're not talking about gender-based violence broadly. We're talking about intimate partner violence specifically, which is a narrower part of this picture. But with regard to that, what's happening is that women are they enter relationships with men who present very differently than they ultimately behave. right? And so men don't start off, they come up to a woman and bust a slap on she. That's
Yeah,
not how it
yeah.
begins,
Right,
right? The men are very charming and pleasant and sweet and affirming and flattering and so on and so forth. That's on the front end. That's where that begins.
right,
And so if that's what you know of the person that you have entered into a relationship with, and then one day he's hitting you, how do you make sense of it?
right,
How do you understand that? And then he comes back and he apologizes profusely and he cries and he tells you he was having a terrible time and he was under so much stress, and he gives you flowers and he buy you chocolate and he take you on a trip, and he wants to be very romantic, and he wants to get all touchy feely and right. And so you're like, okay, well, maybe this was really just a bad moment. He had a bad day, a bad time, or it doesn't make sense in the context of all that I've experienced with this person who has been so nice to me.
right,
And so what's happening is that women are trying to understand um, the violence in the context that has been presented to them. And the context that is presented to them may not be a realistic and accurate picture. That's part of the equation, right? And what I just described about that, he's violent and then he comes and apologizes and so on, is part of a consistent and common cycle with intimate partner violence. And it goes round and round. I'm violent, and then I make up. It's called the honeymoon period, and then tension builds, and then I'm violent again, and then I come and make up, and I apologize, and honeymoon period again, and back and round and round and round. And what happens is the cycle gets shorter and shorter until eventually it's just violence. Maybe with no honeymoon. And so you're dealing with that. You're dealing with the reality that women are often put in a position of being economically dependent on men.
right,
And in many instances, men encourage women to be financially dependent on them as a way to essentially set them up. And so you have men who will say, "Girl, don't worry about that. I go take care of you, you ain't to do nothing. I go handle all of that. You just stay home and manage you, and I go handle everything."
yeah,
Right? Not knowing that the back end of that discussion is going to be, well, I'm making you money, so I'm making you lose.
right,
And at that point, you have 3 children and you are not working outside of the home and you have not been in the workplace for years. What do you do? Do you pick up with your 3 children and go and not have any income and nowhere to live?
right,
What do you do? There are women who stay because they know that if they try to leave, they're likely to face even more violence.
that's another thing.
There are women who stay because if they try to leave, their communities and their families actually punish them. Is not a good woman, go back home, take care of the man, you give him too much horrors, right? And that business of blaming the victim. And so there are all of these different kinds of considerations that may be in play that have nothing to do with anything being wrong with the woman emotionally or psychologically, and may have everything to do with realistic, practical considerations that are facing her.
Wow, wow. Let me direct this question to Mr. Stewart, because jumping off of what Mr. Collier just said, we there's this way that we deal with especially intimate partner violence. You go to the police, or you go to a pastor, a preacher, elder, a minister, and they want to encourage you to go back home and make it up with your husband and fix things. And should women sacrifice their health and even by extension their lives to preserve a marriage? abusive one?
I think, especially in today's time, the answer is no. It is. We've seen where people have returned to their homes without having the situation rectified, and we see that many women have lost their lives. I think even in the religious communities, as persons who are doing marriage counseling, we have advised them to forgive, kiss and make up, and those kind of basic kind of methods of solving the dissolution would not work.
Right.
I think that we need to be able to come to the state of reality that it is a dangerous situation. For if the abuse is taking place, to ask the person who is the victim of the abuse to return to the same space with the person. I know that it challenges the whole doctrine of Christianity and so on with husband and wives and so on. But separation is something that I think there's a time that we have to come in and also support the whole aspect of separation, even if it is not divorce, but at least separation for in the interest of the women who are victims of domestic and intimate abuse.
No, I'm connecting and dealing with it from the aspect of the church. Do you think that the reason why a lot of the times we encourage people to go back home to your husband is because we don't want to take up the responsibility? Because if you remove a woman from a situation where she is now out of that home, as Mr. Collier was saying, she have no economic strength, she have no experience, she is losing experience from not working for years, you know, so she need to find a job, she need to get back on her feet, and for you to remove that woman from that atmosphere, somebody need to step in to help financially. Somebody need to continue to work with her to get back stable mentally, and she would need that extra support. And do you think that we don't have time for that support, and the easiest thing to do is to say, go back with your husband so that we wouldn't have anything much to do
And you're talking about within the church? This
within the
is
church?
your question? Within the church. I think that within the church is issue of competence to be
Okay.
able to deal with them. I think we've been taught to preach the gospel. We've been taught to be able to go and save the lost. And many times the very people within the churches and the leaders may not have the wherewithal to be able to deal with the social ills that taking place within society.
Right.
And that's why we've got to move to upgrade the people that we have as leaders in the churches so that they'll be able to be more competent. It's not that they don't want to. Many of them, they don't know how. I've
Right.
known of situations where a woman is being abused and those who know says, listen, it's your husband. They talk about submitting to your husband and so on. And we quote them the necessary scriptures because we are unable to deal with it from any other aspect.
Right.
So I remember that in some cases, the woman would take out now an injunction, a restraining order, against the man because of the abuse. Some of them have been abused in front of their children. And then the church is now quoting scriptures of you shouldn't take a brother shouldn't take a brother to court because we are supposed to stay outside of the legal system. And we know how to quote the disfellowship letters, etc. So it is really upgrading the church. As I said, it is not that they don't want to, they really don't know how to. And
Right.
again, this is where we need to come together as church people, church folk, both men and women, and start talking about this thing, just as how you are, and start saying these are the things that we need to put in place. Could we now ask our preachers and our leaders, evangelists, or elders to be able to now go and take some courses also in counseling and mediation and some of these things and so on? But because some of these are not considered Bible topics.
Right.
But would you believe it is Bible
Yeah.
topic?
Yes,
Because
absolutely.
even when, remember, Solomon had to deal with an issue of dispute between two women.
Yeah.
You understand? So it is knowing the application of scriptures that will be able to deal with almost every situation. Because the Bible says God has given to us all things that pertain unto life and godliness. Most times we know the part about godliness. God has given us everything that pertain to godliness. But he has given us all things that pertain to life also.
Thank you. Yeah, correct. And being in such a situation where you are constantly being battered, you run out for help, And when you run out for help, they try to push you back in the very same situation. What type of psychological effect, Mr. Collier, does abuse and violence, especially intimate partner violence, which is we've seen a lot more of these days? What type of a psychological impact would that have on a woman in the situation and women outside of the situation?
So I want us to step a little past just the intimate partner violence.
Right.
Not that it's not important, but right now, part of what we're seeing um, is that the very public commission of violence by men against women, um, whom they don't know. Right? So we're talking about stranger violence, men physically and sexually assaulting and even murdering women that they don't know.
Right.
That particular issue has been absolutely terrifying for women. It has traumatized a lot of women. And so I am seeing in my practice a number of women who are displaying signs of acute stress disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder, which are largely the same thing. It's just a question of how recent the traumatic event has been.
That's right.
Um, where women are, afraid every time, just about every man that they see. They are at least suspicious. They're constantly vigilant. They're looking around. They're afraid to do normal life things, to get up and go to work and take a taxi and go to work and go back home and so on. They're anxious. Going to the supermarket, they're worried. Every time they find themselves in a situation where they find some man that they don't know is in close proximity and they're not in a crowd or whatever, they feel really anxious, and that's been going on for a lot of women right now. Um, and so that's sort of the broad thing that's happening in our society. In terms of the intimate partner violence, which is a more narrow focus, if you are experiencing abuse, um, and it doesn't necessarily have to be physical violence, because psychological abuse is extremely devastating. It's attacking your inner self. It's attacking who you are. And if that is happening, um, the outcomes can include depression, anxiety, significant loss of self-esteem, um, and lots of other sort of ways of trying to compensate and manage those things that cause subsequent problems. For example, substance abuse in women is frequently associated with violence that they've experienced
Mm.
at the hands of men. Um, and so you have all of those things sort of in place and to consider um, with women who are facing abuse. If you then go to your faith community, your place of refuge, the place where you are supposed to be spiritually fed and taught and supported, and what you get there is dismissal of your concerns, your safety, even your life. Where do you go?
Mm.
What do you have left? And so for me, the failure of the church to respond in, as Michael says, in a competent way to women's needs when they are faced with violence by the men in their lives is itself a kind of abuse, and a particularly damaging kind of abuse.
Wow. This is powerful. Um, there are things
You
that.
know,
Go
Leo,
ahead.
I
Yeah.
just want to interject here. In addition to knowing what to do, you spoke about providing the necessary support and so on.
Yeah.
I this is my personal view. I know that the funds of the church should go towards the spreading of the gospel. But there are certain benevolent outreach community programs that I believe the church must be involved with. And yes, we would want to spend it on crusades, etc. But you know, Christ was preaching to some people, and after he was finished preaching, somebody said, you know, the the people are hungry, so let's send them home because we've done our part as church people. We preached 3,000 persons were here. We had a nice crusade. Let them go home. And Christ says to them, give them to eat. Something that had nothing technically to do with the gospel. And he put them to sit down. And he found bread and fish to feed them. And I think that sent a powerful message that
Yes.
all societal issues we need to
Yes.
consider. In fact, the Bible says the next time he had the similar crusade, he had 5,000 up from three.
Right.
You know that? So if we don't meet the needs of the people, how could they think that we are genuinely concerned about them besides just trying to increase our numbers in the church
Right.
building? But when you show genuine concern for people, and when we see these issues taking place with women in domestic society, and we reach out to them, then those are the people who are going to say, wow, you know, this is love that I'm seeing here. Because this is how men know that we are disciples.
Yeah.
Not by the gospel we preach, but by the love that we show one another. You can preach out the gospel you want, and if they don't see love, they're not going.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're totally correct. Sometimes we can be so fixed-minded that we can't see another way of reaching people, investing the funds that we have to reach people. When you touch somebody and you're able to connect with them and show them that, look, you're concerned about their well-being and improving their situation, then you're more likely to get the person to become a part of what you are a part of than just going and opening a Bible and having a big tent or open building and preaching the gospel. It doesn't work like that all the time. You will build a stronger relationship, and you will be able to, people would just flow in. You don't have to say to come. People would flow in because they're seeing that, hey, this person care about my well-being, they care about my situation in life. I'm dealing with this, and they actually care about this. That is what people want to see in life. So I think you're correct on that. And we have to learn to start stepping out the box and do things different, invest our money different, and start showing that we actually care for the communities and the things that they are dealing with. We have to get out there and start addressing those things. This is really, really good stuff. When we look at the safety, we mentioned some of that. The safety, a woman going out there and trying to get help. Now it brings, Mr. Collier raised that issue. The man knowing that she is going out to get help, it makes the situation a bit worse. All right. It can lead to her being abused even more, or even to her death. Do you think fear, Mr. Stewart, do you think fear is one of the reasons that a woman remain, and as she continues to just experience this over and over, she believes, okay, well, I'm accepting this is my life, I have nowhere to go, nobody is helping me the way I want help, that's my life, that's how he is, that's what I'm experiencing, and over time it becomes a part of them, and they just accept it for what it is, and they remain in the situation? Do you believe that that's an issue?
Well, yes, in some cases it might be fair. I don't believe it necessarily all cases might be fair.
Right.
It might also be an image issue. Remember now, it takes a lot for a woman to come forward and admit
Right.
that her spouse has been abusive to her. She has a personal embarrassment in order to be able to come out and do that. And many of the women would also preserve the image of the person who does it.
Right.
It is not in her own interest only, but also in the image of the person who is doing it, her family, etc. So she will lie to the doctor and say she ran into a door to preserve the image of the person who did it. So it is, you can't lock it down to one particular reason. There's
Right.
so many reasons.
Right.
And you know, there's something called the Stockholm syndrome.
Hmm.
The Stockholm syndrome, and this is now wider from the domestic issue, which at one point has not been written as part of the mental abuse um, formal issue. I don't know if it is now, but Stockholm issue was where I think it was two men held four persons captive in Stockholm, Sweden, and they held them for a number of days. That eventually there was a bonding that became between the captors and the kidnapped persons. That when they eventually were released, the people who were kidnapped more or less witnessed on behalf of their captors. You understand? They were in support of it, and it says that the psychologically there's a bonding. It doesn't happen in every
Hmm.
situation, but in
Wow.
that one, it says that there's a bonding that you almost support and defended the person
Wow.
who was
Wow.
abusing you.
Wow.
So that goes back to your question as to why is it some people don't leave, because they think that it is in their best interest to stay, right? And as I said, that may not necessarily be formally written as a mental abuse, but many of the psychologists have come up with that.
All right, all right. I know Mr. Collier has to leave, and we just want to thank him so much for being a part of this panel. I just want to pose one question to you as your final question before you take a departure. That question is from one of our or from the audience. That question is, why do controlling men cheat in relationship? What's the logic?
How much time do you have? Um, so earlier on, um, um, Michael, you referred to the music that is played and the things that people put in the songs and so on and so forth. And in the process, you were alluding to the issue of culture, the way that culture plays into violence against women. A lot of the codes that facilitate men's violence against women are embedded in our culture. Um, and those codes include um, the notion that a man should have control over a woman, and also the notion that a man should have multiple sexual entanglements and affairs and so on. Both of those things are wrapped into common cultural themes about what even manhood consists of, what it means to be a real man. Right? If he's a man, he's a girl's man. Yeah, a real woman and thing, that is man. Right? That's part of our cultural code.
Mm,
What is also part of our cultural code is the idea of having control of women. In fact, in Jamaica, um, somebody won't ask you, so that's your girlfriend? No, no, no. The question in Jamaica is, are you controlled at my youth? Do you control that? Not her, that.
mm,
And so the notion of men exercising control over women and the notion of men being polyamorous, um, both of those things are wrapped into our culture. And hopefully we'll have another discussion at some time
yeah.
because we really need to talk about how we come to solutions, and part of that has to be addressing what's happening in the culture.
Mhm.
A lot of times in the church, we'll talk about what's happening in the culture, but we'll talk about it with the things that we want to,
Right.
right? And so we'll address issues of homosexuality in the culture, and we'll address issues of women's promiscuity or sort of lewd behavior as being part of the culture, and we'll address those things. But I rarely do you hear the address of men's culturally embedded, biblically sinful thinking and behavior. and we need to address that.
Wow. Mr. Collier, we want to say thank you so much. You grace us with your presence and your knowledge, your expertise. We want to say thank you so much for joining us on the show. You have done a tremendous work here on Label from the last time we met to this point. We know that you have been doing great things. Your word, your message is going out there and affecting people, and we want to say thank you for constantly doing that.
Thank you very much. It's very kind of you. And hopefully I'll see you again soon, Leo. And Michael, it is a pleasure to see you again. And hopefully we will get to dig into this issue a bit more in the near future.
All right.
Thank
So
you. That's good.
all the best, and I'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
All right. Take care. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. So getting back into things, Mr. Stewart, when you look at, I mean, we could start with our country here in Trinidad and Tobago. If you have knowledge of outside of the country, feel free to share. But when you look at the system in Trinidad and Tobago, all right, check what. Let's take this caller and then we'll get to my question. Let's take this caller. Hello, good morning. Welcome to Labor with Leo. What is your question for our guest this morning?
Good morning, Leo. Good morning to the Label family.
Morning to you.
One of the things, well, I was in an abusive relationship at one time. And one of the things that sort of kept me in it, because it took me 5 years in the relationship, is my sense of low self-esteem. Growing up, I had a lot of issues, within my family circle, and that played a part in my low self-esteem. And I wasn't, how to put it, like you're not amount to anything, so that people talking down on you, you're not good for nothing, you're this, you're that, so that stays with you. So you don't have that, how to put it, you don't have that confidence in yourself that you are good, that you are beautiful, that you are loved. So you end up in relationships that for up to this day, I still can't understand why. What is the reason that we gravitate to that? Maybe is it that that's all that you have learned, or is that what you amount to? But it took me long. I didn't have no support, literally, and to the point where it got so violent that sometime we were having an argument, and he had hit me straight to my jaw, and I felt that up to this day that I'm still being affected by it, because my jaw locks ever so often.
Wow.
I mean, one time I sit and I said, you see this, I have to get out of this. I have to. I didn't have no support, no help, but I had to get out. And in getting out, he started threatening. At one point, he ran me down with a cutlass, and I started to pray. I wasn't a Christian then, but I started to pray and ask God, help me get out of this, and get out of this in where I can, help someone, where I can share my experience with somebody. Because most times you don't have help.
Right.
Most times you're in there alone. Most times people don't believe you. So from then to now, I believe that we should have more programs going, more lessons going, especially for men, especially, from childhood, from young, because a lot of things happen from belly. It starts from the womb. We have broken people from the womb, and they grow up without somebody helping, somebody saying something, and you know they end up being violent to the point where they end up killing their spouses. So it whatever it is, it has to start from the womb, talking positive, talking, things that will let the child know that you are loved, and something needs to be done.
Right.
It's going on, on and on and on. But,
Yeah.
And then somebody brought up a good idea that a lot of seminars need to be done with men and women in the church setting so that they will know, listen, this cannot go on, it has to stop. If you are a child of God, you need to know what you have to do. As a man, you need to know how to treat your children, your spouse. You need to know how to love yourself first of all.
Okay.
So
Point taken.
great topic, and
Point taken.
thank you very much.
Thank you so much for calling. A lot was said here, and that's something that I appreciate. People finding the strength to share some of their experiences. This is real, and this is plaguing not just Trinidad and Tobago, but the entire world. And we have to find a way. We have to start. It may not happen, everything may not fix right away, but we have to take a step now so that later on down the road, our children and those lovely grandchildren of yours that you have, they can have a better place to live. But we have to start now. We have to do what we can now. And I was going to refer to this system in Trinidad and Tobago. Do you believe women have faith in the system present here in this country?
I don't believe that we have demonstrated the kind of protection and security enough, because many women don't venture out of their homes after a certain hour, 6,
Right.
7 o'clock, 8 o'clock in some cases, and that's because they don't feel safe in the society. Parents don't like their little children to be out, even because they don't feel safe. And we get into a point now that even men don't feel safe
Right.
because of the kind of violence that's going down. So we're talking about here in our country, because other islands may have a different experience.
Yeah.
But certainly, the violence across the Caribbean is increasing at such exponential proportion that it's becoming worrisome. And that is why I say that we've got to find a way that we move both the male and the female, both genders, in the pathway towards healing. And we can't do it with one. And the reason why I'm giving a strong support for that is that, United Nations, that determines the international holidays,
Right.
have assigned holidays to a number of things around the world. And when International Women's Day was launched for March 8th, the United Nations said it is to be able to deal with equality of the genders and so on. So March 8th is recognized internationally. But the thing that is of concern to me and to others is that United Nations would have given 7 or more days, I think I counted on their calendar, to women, International Women's Day, the Day Against Violence Against Women, the Day of the Girl Child. They've given rural women a day. They've even given turtles a day. They've even given migrating birds a day. But out of all of the days internationally that they have on an entire calendar of 1 year, not one that I see for men. But the talk about equality was the one that was proposed on their calendar for International Women's Day. In fact, International Men's Day is celebrated by about, I think it is 80-something countries. And that is November the 19th. Is International Men's Day.
Right.
But the United Nations has on that day the World Day of the Toilet.
What?
You understand? So we're talking about a system. So I think men have found that the system is also against us. And because remember, your topic is protecting our women and preserving our men. So
Yeah.
it has to be a balance with what the men are going through. If anybody just Google now, just go to the United Nations, you just Google November 19th, you will see it's World Day of the Toilet. It's not recognized. World the day of the World Day of the Boy Child is May 16th, which is coming up next month. May 16th is the World Day of the Boy Child. International United Nations doesn't have that.